Our hearts are heavy because of our brethren in Israel. So we dedicate this to Am Yisrael and also the broader humanitarian. We're torn apart by all kinds of violence. But as children of survivors, we understand the existential threat. My father was actually in a supermarket with my twin sister and had to go into a miklat. And I don't think he had done that since Vienna. So let's begin. I'm going to share my screen. And I'm going to discuss today the two censuses. And as you can you see the blue? Just raise your thumb. Okay. If you split Bamidbar, it's a sefer called the Book of the Wilderness. And yet, what do we call it in the Septuagint and in English? We call it the Book of Numbers. Why? Because at the beginning and at the end of the book, there is a census. There are two censuses, censi. There are two censuses in the Book of Numbers. In the first chapter, there is a national census of men between age 20 and 60. And in chapter 2, there's the layout of the camp and the precise camping and marching order. And then 3 and 4 is the Levim. And then at the end of the census, there is another census. And the first census is Lefi HaDegalim. And you all know this. Can you see the layout of the tribes? Is it showing up? Okay. And as you can see, everything is Mishkan oriented. Everything is Mishkan oriented. Whereas the census that we will be discussing later is not Mishkan oriented. And let's just look at the numbers, the two censuses. The census in the first year of the wilderness is 603,550, whilst the one in the 40th year is 601,730. And so we're going to compare and contrast Numbers 1 and Numbers 26. And the number of males 20 years and older implies a population of well over 2 million, including women and children. Well, there are some scholars who suggest that that assumes that the word Aleph means 1,000, but I don't want to go into that rabbit hole. But let's now look at the Netziv's introduction to this transition from the first census to the second. And my focus today will be the Hamikdover. The Hamikdover is a work written by the Netziv around 1849 for 10 years. And then he survived his own Hamikdover and was able to write on the side, and I'm going to show you what this actually looked like. This is the manuscript of the Netziv's Hamikdover, and you can see additions because he had seen the printed edition of his own work come to fruition and wrote Hagos on the side. And you can see interlinearly and on the side these Hagos. Now, the Netziv's manuscript were handed down to the Shapira family, our cousins, who later on was able to, in the 70s, was able to reprint the Netziv with what they call the Harchiv Dover. And so they were able to reprint it with this. Unfortunately, there were 2 or 3 editorial omissions because they are very Haredi and they didn't want any mention of commentaries on the Bible that the Netziv liked that they didn't approve of, including Mendelssohn's Biur. So those were edited out, which is very unfortunate, as in all editorial decisions. But here is the actual, I wanted to share with you what his handwriting looked. His commentary is very dense. It's an Aramaic and biblical kind of Hebrew. It's a very, very difficult Hebrew. Now, let's just share with you the actual text that's brought in Cooperman's edition of the Hamek Dover. And let's just look at this. And so I'm going to be going off these texts. In his introduction to the Sefer Bamidbar, the Netziv points out the dual nature of the census in the beginning of the book and in the end of the book. And the census mentioned in our Parsha in the second year of their wanderings in the wilderness, and the second census at the end of 40 years in the wilderness. So we have a census in the beginning and a census at the end of the wilderness. The Netziv says that these 2 censuses mark a distinct transition in the history of the Jewish people. So let's read it. Sefer Nikra b'Mishnah Yuma, and in the Tana Rabbi China ben Gamliel, in the Gemara and Sota, it's called Chumash HaPekudim. That's where we get the idea that this is called the Book of Numbers, not the desert, Bamidbar. Bamidbar just happens to be the first word of the Sefer. Just Ve'ele Shmos B'nei Yisrael is Shmos. Bereshis Ba'alakim is Bereshis. Eile HaDevarim is Devarim. But actually, it's called Chumash HaPekudim, the 5th of the Bible that is called Numbers, V'chein Kosov HaBahag. And the Nirsham B'das Rabbeinu Seinu, so the Netziv says that it's clear from the mind of our rabbis, our sages, that the reason we call the book of Numbers, Numbers, Shebazeh HaSefer Yosef Mishari Devarim Shemiyuchodim Bazeh HaSefer. Now, this is the Netziv's editorializing. The Netziv is saying that there were many things that occurred in Bamidbar, the spies, Miriam, the rebellions and everything. No, he's saying the Iker Sefer, the point of this Sefer, the underlying trajectory of this Sefer, Hu hamachlif umeshane halichus am Hashem b'chaye olam. It is the transition, hamachlif, a distinct transition in the history of the Jewish people, b'chaye olam, from what to what? Me'az shehigiu le'eretz Yisrael, the end point being arrival at the shores of Eretz Yisrael, min adera sheholchu bamidbar. Wow. The Netziv is talking history, not content. He's saying that the reason for the first census and the last census is to show a transition that's occurring in the life of the nation. The Netziv has a notion of history. The Netziv and Reb Tzadok in the 19th century are the first to talk about the sweep of Jewish history. No one talks like that. In his introduction before shiyur, the Netziv has an essay on anti-Semitism. An essay, long, talking about the history of anti-Semitism from the beginning to the times in Russia. It's a sweep of history. Shemim b'midbar hoyu mitnahagim b'midas tiferes. In the wilderness, the behavior was with the midah of tiferes. Sheholach liyamin Moshe legamri lemala me'alichas teva. Wow. That the entire behavior in the midbar was a mirror of the personality and the cult of Moshe, who was legamre lemala mehalichas. He was above nature. It was supernatural. Their whole being in the midbar was a supernatural kind of existence. Ube'eretz Yisrael holchu b'derech hateva. We went from supernatural to natural laws of nature, besisrei hashgachas malchus shamayim, where the providential interference was hidden in the history of the kings of Israel and the judges and everything. V'zeh hashinui hitchil odem bamidbar b'shnas ha'arbayim. That already began in the 40th year before going into Eretz Yisrael. So he's saying that the first census versus the second census, that the census was not done chronological. The tribes were not counted based on age. In the first census, as we had shown that little picture, that they were through their degalim, through the flags, based on the way they traveled in the desert. Each tribe traveled in a certain position, relationship to the Mishkan, to the divine presence in the tabernacle. This traveling was based on the Degalim, according to Chazal, to the heavenly chariot. And the way they appeared down on earth is the way the heavenly chariot travels, as it were. However, the counting of the Sefer Bamidbar at the end of 40 years was done chronologically. The first counting took place when the people's existence was manifested on a supernatural level, and they had manna from heaven, water from the well, and at the end they entered a different type of life. And let's carry on. And then he starts to quote this medrash, which we'll go into. The normal existence at the end of Sefer Bamidbar was the transition point for going into Eretz Yisrael. They went from being a nation which lived on the manna from heaven to a nation that had to live on the laws of nature. And the points in time for the Netziv historically were marked by the two countings, the census. The first based on the Degalim, reminiscent of the Shechina, and the second being Minateva, on the natural way. And this is why the book is called the Book of Countings, because the countings mark the transition of Klal Yisrael from a supernatural to a natural existence. Now, he quotes the proof of this. He uses a midrash in Breshit Rabbah. And this is a very interesting medrash. And the medrash starts as follows. The second verse, the second pasuk in the Torah, it says, "Vayome Elohim yehi or," and God saw that it was light. Vayehi or, and it was light. Vayar Elohim et haor ki tov, and God saw that the light was good. Vayavdel Elokim ben or ben achoshech, so he divided the light between darkness and light. Vayikra Elokim laor yom, and so he called the night day. That is the second verse in the Bible, and comes along the Midrash and tells us something very interesting. The Midrash tells us Omer Rabbi Simon, Hey pa'amim kativ kan ora. There are 5 mentions of the word ora in this pasuk. The pasuk says, Vayom Elokim yehi or, vayehi or, vayar Elokim es or ki tov, vayavdel Elokim es or ben achoshech uben achor, vayikra et or yom. 5 times. And now Rabbi Simon says, these 5 mentions of or are not just a cosmological history of light from darkness, which is the pshat. Pshat is, how do we get the light separated from the darkness? And now we have light. This is all before the sun was created in the 4th day. This is a supernal kind of light. We've talked about this. And he says now, I'm going to tell you something. Hey pa'amim kasiv kan ora, the 5 mentionings of the word or, keneged chamisha chumshei Torah. What? I'm talking about the history of the universe, the Big Bang Theory, light, explosion, energy, and the creation of our cosmological world. And Rabbi Simon, 3rd century, is telling us, you know, I'm going to bring it down to the Am Yisrael's level. The 5 mentions of light are the 5 books of the Torah. Very cute, but let's go into them. Vayom Elokim yihi or, let there be light. Well, Keneged Sefer Bereshis. That's obviously the first book of the Bible, the creation of light. Shebo nitasek HaKadosh Baruch Hu ubara et ha'olam. Okay, I'm good with that, because that's when God got involved in creating the world. So I guess the first or, let there be light, is reflected in the book of Genesis. Next, Vayehi or. Let there be light. Okay, and there was light. Now he goes from the cosmological to the historical. Keneged Sefer ve'ele Shemos. So the let there be light is Bereshis, and there was light is Shemos. Why? Shebo yatsu Yisrael me'afelo la'ora. Brilliant. We went from darkness to light. Let there be light, and there was light. You know what the light was? Yetzias Mitzrayim. So we've gone from the cosmological era to the historical era. From the creation of light to, and there was light, and you know how I can prove it? Yetzias Mitzrayim. We went out of darkness of Egypt, an existential state of darkness, to an enlightened state of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Next. Vayar Elokim et haor ki tov. And God saw that the light was good. Keneged Sefer Vayikra. Oh, this is going to be a tough one. How am I going to connect the goodness of the light? God saw that it was good. Well, Ein Tov Elo Torah. We know that from Psukim. Ki lekach tov nosati lokem. I gave you a good inheritance. Ein Tov Elo Torah. Ki lekach tov nosati lohem. Torasi, right? Al tazovu. We sing it every Shabbos when we put the Sefer Torah back. Oh, vayar lekim es or ki tov keneged Sefer Vayikra shehu malei halachos rabos. There are tons of halachos in Vayikra. There's no narrative. There's no historical stuff going on in Vayikra. It's all about laws. Okay. Vayar lekim es or ki tov, ein tov elo Torah. Vayikra is Torah. Lots of halachos. Very nice. Now let's come to our Sefer Bamidbar. What does Rabbi Simon say about Sefer Bamidbar? Fasten your seatbelts, ladies and gentlemen. Vayavdel Elokim bein ha'or ubein ha'choshech. Now God made a separation between the light and the darkness. Zeh Sefer Bamidbar. Why? Shehu Mavdil Bein Yotzei Mimitzrayim Labaye Haaretz. We had, and God saw that the light was good. That's coming out of Mitzrayim from darkness to light. And now there's a whole switcheroo. What happens? Sefer Bamidbar looks at those Yotzei Mitzrayim, those people in the Bamidbar, as in the those who departed from Egypt, as Yotzei Mitzrayim, as Choshech, Liboy Ha'eretz Yisrael, and that's the light. So we came out of Mitzrayim from darkness to light. We're now transitioning, going from Bamidbar into Eretz Yisrael. That's going from also a new darkness into the light. Do you see the parallelism and the complete chiastic structure? Rabbi Simon has switched us around. Yes, you came out of Egypt. You came out of darkness. You went into the Midbar. Now, thank God you're out of the darkness. You're in the light. Whoa, wait a minute. During those 40 years in the Midbar, stuff went down. And that became darkness compared to going to Eretz Yisrael. And then he ends Vayikra Elokim La'or Yom. That's Keneged Sefer Mishnah Torah, which is Deuteronomy, Devarim, Shehu Mole Halachas Rabbos. It's full of laws, different laws. Vayikra laws are different to Devarim laws. I don't want to get into that. So in the incidents in Bamidbar, during the incidents of the spies, which really thematically is the high point of Sefer Bamidbar, precisely because it is the turning point in which God says that the generation that left Mitzrayim will not go into Eretz Yisrael. That is the separation between the light and the darkness, is the decree separating the generation of the Midbar and the next generation that will go into Eretz Yisrael. Now, if we read the Eitz Yosef, I just put it up here so everyone can read it. He says, "Madua vayavdel Elokim ben or ben achoshech keneged Sefer Midbar." So he quotes the Yefas Torah, Parshas Bamidbar, Yesh es haminyan shel Yotzei Mitzrayim. He now goes back to that two censuses. In his commentary to Breshit Rabbah, remember this is, medieval. Netziv is 19th century, so the Netziv is picking up on this, right? There is a census of Yotzei Mitzrayim, Ubapashas Pinchas, at the end of Bamidbar, there is a counting of Yotzei Haaretz. Shnei minyonim elu, these two censuses, mavdilin ben elu sheyotzei Mitzrayim lebein elu shenichnas Eretz Yisrael. Like the Netziv says, the two censuses form the beginning and the end of Sefer Bamidbar. So then the Yefei Torah, quoting Eitz Yosef, quoting Yefei Torah, says, "V'heyos vayishnem Abdallah ben Elu yotzim Mitzrayim." So now Rabbi Simon, he says, is characterizing the Yotzei Mitzrayim is Yitzias me'achoshech to'eves Mitzrayim. Coming out of Mitzrayim is Vayar Elokim ki tov. It was good, the light, because they got out. Lebein eile shenichnas et Yisrael is the Ora shel Olam. So he goes from Mitzrayim to Eretz Yisrael. What happened in between? He doesn't say that. He doesn't look at the switcheroo that it takes place. Okay, so we have to look at that. We have to look at the fact that al pi pshuto shel dover, for Rabbi Simon, being in the wilderness was dark. It was a darkness compared to going to Eretz Yisrael. Now, when we go back to the Netziv considers being in, let's share that again. What does the Netziv say? Zeh hashinui hametsuyon bezeh hasefer omru Chazal. Now he's quoting Rabbi Simon in Breshit Rabbah. Vayavdel Elokim ben or ben achoshech zeh sefer bamidbar. Now watch what he says. Shehu mavdil ben Yotzei Mitzrayim ubein boel Eretz Yisrael. There is a separation between those who come out of Mitzrayim and those who go into Eretz Yisrael. That's not what the Medrash said. The Medrash said was those who were in Mitzrayim and those who went out of Mitzrayim. They're not that they're going to Eretz Yisrael. Just getting out of Mitzrayim was the light. The behalichas yotze Mitzrayim hoya or hashkochas Hashem mofia lein kol. Those who were going out of Mitzrayim experienced the divine hashgacha, and everyone felt it. It was overt. Shehu kavod Adonai v'tachlis abrio, which was the original intent that God would have his manifestation in the world. That's why he uses up here tiferes, b'midas tiferes. Ma she'ein came b'halichas boe Eretz Yisrael. Going to Eretz Yisrael was a new type of darkness. Why? Hoyasa ha'ashgacha mechuseh. The divine providence now going to Eretz Yisrael, it's a new type of darkness. V'rak hamabit ba'ayin yafeh hoya margish bazeh. So funny because the commentary on the Midrash was ayin yafeh. And only who looks with an ayin yafeh, an eye that sees beyond nature, beyond the natural, margish ba, can feel God's presence and divine. Kamo ha'holech behashchachas halayla. So for the Netziv, going in the darkness of the light is the character of being in Eretz Yisrael. Living in Eretz Yisrael in the real world with the state and the military and the stuff we have to do is like going in darkness. Oh, rak leprakim oiso nirgeshes hashgacha le'inko. And it was very rarely in certain chapters in Jewish history that we would feel the divine presence. The Netziv is writing at a time when the Russian government wants to close down his beloved yeshiva Volozhin, and he doesn't see the divine presence and the providence in all of this. He died a broken man. Just like maybe there's a lightning strike in the middle of the night, so there's just a flash of lightning. I think this is a dazzling Netziv. It's a theory of Jewish history. There is this original time, beyond time, we call the wilderness, the Yetzias Mitzrayim, this mythic journey through the wilderness where we were adored Dea, we experienced the divine in everything. And then we had to get ready through the second census to be prepared for a new type of darkness. What is the darkness? Living in nature. And in many ways, the time when he's writing this, Reb Tzadok HaKohen and the Morinayim and the Meshiloach are writing that the Jews' function is to see through the veil of nature. That's the mystical experience. The Netziv does not allow us such a beautiful luxury. We are exposed leprakim, rak leprakim, only in certain times in our history that we have these flashes of lightning in the darkness where we see the light of the divine providence manifesting itself. Very nice. Now let's go a little bit deeper and look at one of the commentators. I call him the Meshiloach. The Meshiloach is writing about 70 years before the Netziv. And I was searching for any Hasidic Rebbes that talked about these 5 lights, Yehi Or, Vayehi Or. I mean, it sounds like it's ready for a Hasidic interpretation. And I found it in the Mei Shiloach, the Ishbitzer Rebbe. Now, just remember that his Shalshelis goes as follows. Baal Shem Tov, the Maggid of Mezrich, sends to Poland the Noam Elimelech and the Choseh from Lublin. The Choseh's disciple is the Yid HaKodesh, the holy Jew of Pshischa. His disciple is Reb Simcha Bonim of Pshischa, and his disciple is the Kotzker Rebbe and the Mei Shiloach, Reb Mordechai Leiner, Mei Shiloach. And in the second volume of Mei Shiloach, so this is later on in his life, he says the following. Hayom Elokim Yehi Or Vayehi Or, Vayav Elokim Es Or Ki Tov, Vayavdel Elokim Ben Or Ben Achoshek, Vayikra Lehim LaOr Yom. 5 times it's mentioned. He doesn't quote the Medrash. He goes straight into this brilliant psychological analysis and says, Nema Chamisha Pa'amim Or. It's mentioned 5 times the word light in the second verse of the Bible. Why? 5 times. Could easily have said, and God said, let there be light, and he split the light between the darkness. What's this, all this business? He saw it was good and it's not good, but splitting. So he goes 5 times. Nema Chamisha Pa'amim. Okay, let's go through the stages of a man's life. Yehi Or Harishonhu. What does that mean? Hashem Yisbarach Meichin Beino Lebein Atzmo Lahari Lahatam. That there is a moment in every person's life when there is an intention beyond us to reveal some kinds of inner spiritual light to us. That's the first one, the intention. Yehi Or, let there be light. And that is God Meichin Beino Lebein Atzmo. God's talking to himself. Hey, that little boy over there, that boychicle, I'm going to give him some light. He's going to go in this path because I'm opening his soul to the light. And it's different for different people. V'oid, eina adam mevin bazeh, and don't think that you know this. This is unconscious, or what Jung would say is the collective unconscious that then must manifest itself in a person. Einam adam mevin bazeh umargish klal. He doesn't feel a thing. Rak Hashem Yisbarach osek lahoyed. It's God busying himself, getting ready to set an aliquot of spiritual light to send down into his soul. V'achakach, now the second Or, Vayehi Or, and there was light. What's that? Sheha Adam matchil lahargish. I feel a hergish. It's brilliant. I feel something. My life isn't right. I'm a kid and I'm looking and it's just, whatever's there is not a knife. I'm searching. Sheha Adam matchil lahargish. A person feels. He begins to feel. He has a hargosha. V'achakach, step 3. Vayar Elokim et ha'or ki tov. Oh, there's something good about this light. Sheha Adam makir et boro. Now I realize there is something transcendent. There is a higher power that is, I have a sense. Umevin, nothing more than that. Umevin, and I understand. Ki tov lahamshich acha Hashem Yisborach. Okay, so there is this, what Wordsworth would call imitations of immortality. Beautiful poem, right? Intimations of immortality. There is this, what the 19th century British poets would call the sense of the sublime. There's a sense that there's something beyond my life and that I should be pursuing it, that it should be the driver that forces me to pursue this intimation of immortality, of the sublime. Number 4, Vayavdel Elokim bein ha'or bein ha'choshech. What does that mean? The splitting between the light and darkness. Hainu, sheha'adam hu sur meira. That a person understands now that the light and darkness out there is also in here. That there is the two chambers of the heart, as the Balatanya calls it. And the medievalists call it the Yetzer Tov and the Yetzer Hara, whatever. But that for the Meshiloach is that there is the inner heart of darkness. He's talking about that. Ki Tov lahamshich achar Hashem. It is good. And Vayavdil Elokim is what? Sheha'adam hu sur meira. In order to pursue this divine light, I'm going to have an eternal lifetime struggle with that inner darkness. To sur meira. I cannot let it overtake me. The sense of depression and the sense of addiction and the sense of hopelessness. I have to run away from that. Umikol mokron tzorach achakach oid. And even after that, there is the fifth stage, Vayikra Elokim la'or yom, meaning it's not enough just to fight the heart of darkness, but asay tov, kedisa b'gemara la'asok b'zu ha'hakara. You have to take that recognition, v'lavod et Hashem v'lasos mitzvahs and masin tovim. There has to be something in mitzvahs and masin tovim, in the actualization of your behavior. That mythical behavior has to be coming out in mitzvahs and masim tovim, in mythical behavior and rituals, and in good deeds and kindness. I think that this is a brilliant Meshiloach. It's an anatomy of the soul in one paragraph. They're just brilliant. And I want to end up with that sense of the darkness and the light. And I want to go and quote to you. And if I did, I'll tell you who it is afterwards, but I don't want to tell you until I've read it to you, so that I want you to think about it. Never mind where it's coming from, okay? Because you're going to be upset with me. So let's just look at this. God could not persuade, I'm going to do it in an Indian accent, because he was a guru. God could not persuade the darkness to come before the sun. This happened billions of years ago, they say. The problem remains still unsolved, for darkness is not the opposite of light, but its absence. Darkness is not the opposite of light, but its absence. Understand well the difference between opposite and absence. If darkness is the opposite of light, we could throw a handful on a lamp and the light would go out. We cannot do that for the simple reason that darkness is the absence, the non-presence, the non-being of light. It has no existence of its own. Light has its own existence. When light is not, what remains is darkness. This is not the darkness of Egypt, okay? Chazal talk about the palpable darkness of Egypt. That's a different type of extraterrestrial darkness that descended. This is the light that God created on the first day. In exactly the same manner, all that is considered evil in light, I look upon as darkness, be it greed, sex, anger. All that is bad in life is full of darkness. Generally, we look upon one who fights this darkness. Remember, the Meshiloach said, Sur Meira. He didn't say fight it. The Chidushei Ram said, why does Hasidus look at the Asay Tov? Because the more you grob in the Ra, the more you get sunk in the blotter with the Ra. So we just don't do that. We focus on the good, right? This is what he's saying. One who fights this darkness as an ascetic, a man of temperance, I do not call him so. I consider the methods of such people as devices for insanity and hypocrisy. And neither a hypocrite nor a lunatic is a desirable state of being. Darkness is not to be fought with. A lamp has to be lit. In the presence of light, there's no darkness. Whatever is excellent in life, that alone is truth. Its absence is neither the opposite nor the inverse of its presence. Its absence is its pure non-presence alone. And therefore, a man of violence can cultivate non-violence, but the violence remains within. I love this. How many years one struggles with the Yetzer Hara, and you can try and cultivate non-violence, but the violence remains within. A man may cultivate celibacy, but sex will rage just as much within. Such self-control is deception, and I am against it. I am in favor of that self-control in which we do not subdue the evil, sur meira, don't subdue it, but awaken the good within. Does that not sound like the Baal Shem Tov? If you have a Yetzer Hara, what do? You schlep him to the base medrash. You don't fight the Yetzer Hara, but awaken the good within. We do not remove darkness, but kindle a light within. Such awakening transforms the man and takes him to the temple of truth. He who awakens to the truth reaches this temple. And I want to end with this quote, because someone is asking him in one of the sessions, and she's asking him about fighting the evil inclination. And so he says to her, you are surrounded by many darknesses: greed, anger, jealousy, lust, ambition, ego. They are layers of darkness. If you start fighting with all the layers of darkness, you're not going to win. There's no way to fight directly with darkness. Darkness does not exist in the first place. It is only the absence of light. So if you want to do something with the darkness, don't try to do it directly. Do something with light. If you want darkness, put the light out. If you don't want darkness, put the light on. But do something with the light. Forget about the darkness. If light is there, darkness is not there. If light is not there, you can't avoid the darkness. You can close your eyes. You can try and to forget about it. You can become occupied somewhere else. You can take your mind far, far away from it, but it's there all the same. It will show in your acts, in your thoughts, in your behavior. It will come up and up again. You cannot hide it. It is impossible to hide it. The truth of your being, whatever it is bound to the surface. I think that this is really what the Meshiloach is saying with those 5 stages of light, and how we have to somehow fight the darkness, whether it's political darkness, Eretz Yisrael darkness, darkness in our lives, in our pandemics, as we come into this night of receiving the light of Torah. It is the light that we need to be able to integrate within ourselves. And there are many different techniques to get rid of the darkness, the sur meira. But I think that we're coming back to and ending up with the Holy Netziv. What he is telling us historically is occurring to us existentially, that we're going from this Elysian fields of feeling and sense of hashgacha, which could well be intrauterine, into the real world where we don't see the hashgacha of the Ribbono Shel Olam, both in the macro level, the political level, the geopolitical level, and the micro level within ourselves. So I bless everyone to experience this light, to latch onto the light this Yontov, and we should all see good news in Eretz Yisrael and have a wonderful, wonderful Yontov.